Hey everyone, this is Tiffany Devine. Come on in, come on in, come on in. You already know what to do. Like, click, subscribe, and share. And welcome everybody in for this another edition of Silhouette of a Queen. And tonight's topic, I think, is really going to be enlightening. I know it has been for me. So while you guys just get situated and come on in and settle, go ahead and share this segment with your girlfriends, with your sisters, your niece, your friends, your mother, your aunt, your cousin, whoever. Bring them on in and introduce them to Silhouette of a Queen. I am the founder. Again, my name is Tiffany Devine, and I am a certified life coach, wardrobe stylist, and I style leaders and influencers in fearless fashions. And I just want to thank you so much for just connecting with me here. Listen, it's almost been a year since I started Silhouette of a Queen. I started this off last year in June of 2020. And listen, let me tell you, I have grown so much just from doing these segments alone. And when I started it, I was nervous. Like anything, when you're starting a new adventure, you can have all of these questions and just thinking like, okay, what is this going to develop into? I had no idea what I was getting myself into. All I knew is that I was just following the voice of God within me that was telling me that I needed to start it and I didn't need to drag my feet and I needed to make it happen. And so I made it happen within 2 weeks. So for those of you that have been rocking with me for a year, I thank you so much. Thank you for letting me know privately how much the Silhouette of a Queen of the segments have been blessing you, because this certainly has been blessing me. And I'm not saying that arrogantly or boasting or bragging. It's just that a lot of the segments that I have put a lot of effort into are things that God has taken me through personally, or even as I was coming up with the ideas for the segment, He was working it out through me. And so I even shed a lot of tears just with even birthing this. And so again, I'm just super appreciative of anyone that has ever followed me, anyone who's ever commented, because, they say Oprah wasn't built in a day. And she certainly wasn't. She started somewhere. Everyone that has really reached some level of success had to start somewhere. And so I just want to tell you, whatever it is that you're doing, just know that you have to start somewhere. And even in the midst of a pandemic, there are great things that are happening, which is why I want to talk about what I'm talking about tonight, which is lessons in the pandemic. Okay, lessons in the pandemic. And so I want to just make sure here that we are, let me see that, everything is going good. Okay, so I just wanted to check the volume. And so I just got feedback that everyone can hear me. I'm trying something new tonight on my end. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone could hear me. So thank you. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's segment. Again, it's called Lessons in the Pandemic. So we've been in this pandemic for an entire year. And I don't think none of us in the world were ever prepared for the things that were going to happen. So if you're like me, last year around this time in March of 2020, when COVID just really started surfacing and things were beginning to shut down and everyone was starting to transition to working from home. And I remember, getting my work from home equipment and thinking like, okay, this is probably just going to last for 6 weeks and we'll be back in the office. And then after 6 weeks, it turned into 8 weeks and then 10 weeks. And it was just like, oh, okay, we're not going back anytime soon. And then it just was like COVID just swept the nation. I mean, just completely shut everything down. Businesses were closed, what, 6 to 8 weeks, I believe it was. And so we were just walking through tumultuous times, things we had never thought of that we ever dreamt of. I mean, everything just shifted. And so it was during this time that, like most people, I started getting anxious, and seeing the death toll rise, just seeing so many people being affected by COVID, and it was just devastating. And so over a period of time, not that I really sunk into depression, but I found myself, starting to go into a space that I knew that had I not kept myself uplifted, and sharing with my circle of friends what was going on with me emotionally, I could see very well how this season and this time would have been a space where people would have just lost it. And a lot of people did. Marriages fell apart, relationships and partnerships and business, a lot of things folded. But at the same time as everything was folding, things were birthing and coming forth, and new things were happening as well. So that's part of also the lessons in the pandemic. So I want to really, talk about that and dive into that really deeply tonight, because even for myself, I had no idea some of the things that God would begin to stir up even in the midst of this pandemic. So it was around this time last year, around last June, I started having insomnia. I could not sleep. I will be up till, 2 and 3 in the morning, just laying in my bed, just wide awake, could not sleep at all. And I'm thinking, okay, what's wrong? What's happening? And over a period of time, it just rolled into months. And so much to the point that I then started popping up out of my sleep around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. That was a pattern. 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, just popping up out of my sleep, thinking someone was getting ready to come into my home. And I would just run to my door looking out the peephole. And I'm like, where is this coming from? So, like I said, over a period of a year, this happened about 5 times. And because I am a person of faith, I began praying into it like, okay, God, what's happening? What's wrong? Like, why is this happening? And it was then that God began to show me that I was dealing with some trauma issues from a previous generation. Now, when I say a previous generation, I mean like things like on my maternal side of my family that have happened. Those generational traumas can show up in your life without you even knowing. And so I said, okay, all right, God. And so he began to share with me that he was going to show me how to deal with a lot of the things that I was facing and dealing with. And I had no idea, no clue as to what was happening. But I decided, okay, all right, God, I trust you, and I'm just going to follow your lead. And so that's what I did. So over a period of time of last year, I started really peeling back some things. Now, I am a person that God deals with in dreams. So he shows me things in dreams. And so I remember having this dream like probably maybe about 4 or 5 months before the pandemic. And in my dream, I go to see my doctor. And my doctor looks at me and she says, "You're not sick. You're dealing with a familiar spirit. I need you to go back and heal the little girl." And I woke up out of the dream. And I was like, what does this mean? Go back and heal the little girl. Nothing happened to me as a little girl. I have no idea. I prayed and prayed and prayed into this dream for a period of 8 months before God gave me the first revelation to that dream. And he said to me that the little girl represented the foundation. And so again, I was like, okay, all right, that kind of makes sense. But again, God, nothing has happened to me as a little girl. What does this mean? And so God would say nothing. And then over next of the course, maybe 5, 6 months after that, is when I started really diving into looking at some generational patterns, like I mentioned earlier, that came before me, and I began to study and look at what happens when there is a generational cycle of of anxiety and depression, which I began to see that not only did I struggle with that in my own personal life over the years, but started noticing and paying attention that this was a pattern as well of the women in my family. And so, okay, I'm like, okay, this is making sense. And then what happens when there is abuse and trauma, right? So abuse and trauma is the doorway for strongholds to take place. So when there is any type of abuse happening, whether it's mental abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, those things, and if you don't deal with these things, they can be the gateway for things like, which is what I personally have dealt with, which is abandonment, pride issues, rejection, rebellion, and self-loathing. And self-loathing just simply means that you tend to beat up on yourself. You're very critical of yourself, and when you're very critical of yourself, that even can spill out into how you're critical with other people. So I began to dive into that and dissect that a bit and look into that, how it played out into my life. That was the first step. And so I would definitely say, in the midst of this pandemic situation, because everything had slowed down and came to a complete halt, it made me have to look at some things that were hidden in plain sight. Because pre-pandemic, we were all living a very busy life, right? Work was happening, extracurricular activities, and so it was very easy for any of us to continue to just slide and put things to the side. You may have known that some things were there. You may have known that there was issues in your marriage or issues in your relationships or issues in your friendships, but you could distract yourself by diving into other things that would keep you busy, making more money, taking on projects where you didn't really have to do anything, numb yourself. So when everything came to a complete halt, there is no going into the malls, there is no shopping, there is no going out to eat, and you're just confined within your home. It made you have to sit and think and look at some things. And a lot of the things that we were sitting and looking at was not comfortable. Where we were going to run to distract ourselves from feeling, which is why people turn to other devices such as alcohol or sex or mindless scrolling on social media or things like that. But this season in this pandemic was not the time to be distracted. It was a time to really dig deep and go to the root of some issues, which is what I've been doing. So in that space of really identifying, okay, I'm seeing there's these patterns with the rejection and all of these things happening in my life that were the result of some of my mother's trauma and my grandmother's trauma. And I have talked about these issues even further on another segment called Patterns and Cycles. We're in a crisis now. What? If you have not watched that particular segment, I would highly recommend that you watch that segment. It's also on YouTube, but I go into a little bit deeper as to what each um, trauma looked like in my bloodline, as far as the abandonment, pride, rejection, self-loathing. I break all of that down. So for the sake of tonight, I won't get into all of that, but so I began to really to peel back those layers and begin to dive into that. And so when I did that, I began also reading books and investing in therapy and really yanking the roots of some things. Like I knew some of the things were there, but these were the things that God began to really show me about the things that have happened in the previous generation. Now, I believe in this particular time and moment in history where we are standing, I believe we are the chosen generation. You know, as the Bible says, the iniquities of our forefathers fall down to the third and fourth generation, right? And those iniquities are just inward heart postures. Well, like I said, we're the chosen generation to shift this narrative and tell something different, which is why you have been hearing and seeing, unlike ever before, conversations around trauma. And Mahatma Gandhi said it best: if you want to see the world change, you have to be the change in the world that you want to see. So it first starts with us individually before we could ever go out here collectively and begin to shift the narrative. It has to first start with us, right? So I began noticing that I had this posture of always being on the, I guess maybe the offense, of feeling like something bad was going to happen. I could never be at a state of peace, a state of rest, because something bad was going to happen, and I could never understand why I kept feeling like this until God began to, He kept having me to look at this thing of, okay, so if there is abuse that's happening in one's life, which it was not in mine, but again, the previous generation, there you go into a mode of always feeling like you have to protect yourself and watch yourself and things like that. I can't let you catch me slipping, because if you catch me slipping, something can happen to me. So when God began to really deal with me on the thought patterns of these things and having me to see how it was playing out in my life, how it was connected to the insomnia, how it was having me to pop up out of my sleep 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, jumping out of my bed, running to the door to see what's happening, because I was reenacting, living out the trauma from a previous generation. And so God said to me, Tiffany, I need you to take off that armor, because you are wearing an armor from an old era. And that armor is not going to work where you are. And I was just like, oh, okay. And so I made the decision to say, okay, I'm going to choose to do something different. And when I made a choice to do something different, it felt like this burden just lifted off of me. And I literally have not been the same since. And so for me, that meant I was choosing a different way, um, to stand within myself, having a higher self level of self awareness in regards to what I was thinking, how I'm moving. Like, you don't have to think like that anymore. You don't have to be that on. You don't have to even take that on. I understood where it came from. I had the compassion for it to understand like why the women in the previous generation would have even had to think that way. But I don't have to think that way. I don't even have to be that way, because my story is not their story. And in fact, has made me to have a higher level of appreciation for them, for them being able to withstand some of the things that they've had to go through. I have no clue as to what it took to be able to go through that. But I had to say to myself and say to them that I appreciate the work you've done, but I'm going to lift off where you left off, which means I'm going to do it a better way. I'm going to do something different. And I'm going to blaze a path and a new way of being, a new way of living that I'm creating for myself. And I give myself permission to release myself from this old armor of feeling like I had to put this thing on to protect myself. Because although it may have felt like I was protecting myself, I was actually smothering myself. I was not living free. And it helped me to understand the power of inherited trauma and how these things can keep getting passed down from generation to generation and generation. So we also know that adversity is the training ground that prunes us and reveals what's in you. Had this not happened, this season, as difficult as it has been, I wouldn't have known this about myself. I wouldn't have known any of this. In fact, I am reminded of, I had a career coach tell me back in 2018 when I was in transition. from a job that I left, and I had this period where I was unemployed for 9 months. It was the best time of my life being unemployed. I know people are like, "What?" Most people fall apart when they are unemployed, but me, I was laid in the shade and had it made. Okay, and so during that season, I sat down with a career coach, and he was looking at my resume, and he was looking at the different things that I've done and my strengths, and he says, "You thrive in chaos." And I looked at him and I said, "I hate chaos. I don't even like it." He said, "Yeah, I know you may not like chaos, but based on your strengths and who you are, you would bring a level of peace and harmony to an environment that is in chaos." Now, it was one of those things where I just tucked it in my pocket because I was like, okay, that's very interesting. Little did I know that that word, thriving in chaos, would come back to visit me in this season, in the midst of a pandemic. And so, what I can tell you, what God does with chaos is the perfect antidote, and it serves as a backdrop of what God wants to do when He wants to establish something new. Anytime when something is in complete disorder and disarray, and there's no form, there's no structure, there's a void there, it is because He wants to establish something new. So when I began to really, really, really look at what the word chaos meant and thriving in it, it no longer became this thing that made me anxious. It now began to made me ask a question to God to say, like, okay, if I am to thrive in chaos, I need a solution. I need a strategy on how to set order in whatever's happening. And when I tell you God has been meeting me there with that, you see how you can just take something and flip it and make it work for your good. So the chaos in the backdrop, as a chaos, it could be your mindset, it could be your habits, your perception, systems, ideologies, things that have has served its way in manifesting things in your life that are no longer going to serve you. And in this space, because I believe we are still in the midst of this pandemic. COVID is still around. Do not get me wrong about that. It's still here, but I believe we are in the midst of a turn of this situation. I made a post recently about big ships turn slow, and in this post that I made, and I talked about that, is that I referenced it into like the Titanic and how it was impossible for a ship as huge as the Titanic to make this abrupt turn. You just can't do it. That you have to gradually turn. And so I use that as a reference point for when you are hoping and trying to produce a change in your life. It's not abrupt, it's gradual. And it's in the turn that things are happening. It's in the turn that things are manifesting. It's in the turn that things are shaping you. But most times we will get impatient in the process in the midst of the turn because we don't feel like it's turning quick enough, but it's happening. And as you keep turning and you keep doing the work and you keep committing yourself to the pace that God has for you and the path that He has for you, you'll find yourself and look up that you'll be on the other side of that thing. And so that is what I have learned in this pandemic. I have learned that thriving in chaos is not bad. In fact, you're going to see more innovators in this season because they have been positioned in the quiet place. God has had a lot of us positioned in the quiet place of being unknown, but waiting for the perfect time and opportunity to release you to be a solution to where we are right now. He couldn't have did it a year ago. He couldn't have did it 2 years ago because you know why? The world did not think that they needed your expertise. They didn't think they needed your information. But now that the world is in a panic and everybody's trying to figure out like what's happening, what's gonna go, and while everybody's going like this, and everybody's hoarding gas and hoarding toilet tissue and doing all of this, and God is just coming in going like boom. And that's what you're gonna do. That is what you're going to do. You're going to be able to come into a situation and establish order in the midst of chaos. And so that is why he had us protected. That is why he had us covered. That is why he had us working on stuff behind the scenes. That is why we're prospering in this season. How can I birth this movement, if you want to call it that? But how could I birth this silhouette of a queen in the midst of a pandemic? I took what I had and gave it, and it's blessing y'all. And I thank you so much again for just being a part of my life, being a part of watching this. Anytime, like I said at the top of the segment, anytime you click like, subscribe, and share this information, anytime you comment, thank you so much, because it means a lot to me. And so again, I just want to recap. Lessons from the pandemic for me was huge for me in this season was removing the armor from an old era, because we are in a new dimension. And in this new dimension, it's a higher state, it's a higher place of being, it's a higher state of awareness and perception. And we can't take any of that old stuff and bring it up here. It's just not going to work. And in fact, if you refuse to let go of it, you're going to find yourself irrelevant. You're going to find yourself left behind, because you refuse to you refuse to bend, you refuse to evolve. You think you have to do it the way that it's always been done, and that's not true. And so in this season, you're going to have to hear God for yourself. You're going to have to hear him unlike ever before, because he's doing something completely off the cuff, and it's not going to make sense. You can't even look to the blueprint and the structure of the old, because all of that is gone and done away with. And so that is one thing I've learned in this season, is removing the old armor from an old era, because it's not going to function. And that I thrive in chaos, and chaos is just the backdrop that God uses to establish something new. So I thank you again so much for tonight. We're going to move forward with these lessons. I hope that this will serve as a catalyst for your life, for you to begin to look at what was God showing me in the midst of this pandemic. What is my own personal lesson? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to pivot from? What do I need to move into? Because sometimes it's not just enough to know it. And let me tell you something, you're going to have to dig deep. You're going to have to dig real deep. You're going to have to dig deep. If you want it bad enough, you're going to have to dig deep. You're going to have to invest in yourself. You're going to have to some of you are going to have to go to therapy. I'm such an advocate of therapy. I really am. I love it. I love it. Some of you are going to have to do something. I'm a wardrobe stylist too now. Let me not forget to put that out there. Some of you are going to have to switch up your hair, start dressing differently, do something different to show that you're moving into a new space. Some of you are going to have to take up a new skill set. You're going to have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to be willing to be the student all over again when you were the teacher. You're going to have to flip some things and become the best version of yourself. This is the lesson in the pandemic. This was my lesson in the pandemic. But again, I encourage you to dive deep and look into your own personal life and get the lesson for you that God was showing you in this season, so that you are ready to launch and move forward And I can't wait to hear your story. I can't wait for you to send me personal messages on how this segment has blessed you. And you guys, thank you so much again for rocking with me tonight. And the next Silhouette of a Queen will be the year anniversary of Silhouette of a Queen. I'm really excited about that. I'm working on something to do something special for that. But anyhow, again, I thank y'all so much for coming in tonight. And again, I am Tiffany Devon, and I am a certified life coach and wardrobe stylist that styles leaders and influencers in fearless fashions. And I just want to thank you. And until next time we meet again, y'all take care and see you soon.